Welcome, everyone. Good evening. Welcome to tonight's live virtual program presented by the Howell Carnegie District Library and the League of Women Voters of Livingston County. I'm Brandy Tambasco, Adult Services Librarian here at the library. Thank you again for joining us tonight. I have a few housekeeping items to share before we get started. Tonight's program is scheduled to run until 8 p.m. It will begin with a presentation by our speaker, followed by time for audience questions. To reduce distraction during our speaker's presentation, all attendees will be muted. You may share any questions for the presenter during that time in the chat, and then there will be as many as possible will be addressed during the Q&A. During the Q&A session, if you wish to ask a question, let us know in the chat or use the raise hand option under reactions. As you can see, we have a nice little diagram on the screen. And we will unmute you then if you request it, so you can ask your question. Well, as I said, address as many questions as we possibly can in our allotted time. Throughout the program, please report any technical issues you have in the chat. I'll try and assist as best I can. This program is being recorded, and the recording will be available on the library's YouTube channel soon after the live program concludes. If you do not want your video in the recording, make sure your video stays off, that there is a red flash through the camera icon in the bottom left corner of your Zoom window. Now, without further ado, I'll turn things over to Ellen Lafferty, the chairperson of our local League of Women Voters.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us tonight. For those of you who are new to our public forums, the League of Women Voters is proud to be nonpartisan. We neither support nor oppose candidates or political parties at any level of government, but we're always working on vital issues of concern to members and the public. We hope you can join us for our next public event, which is Indigenous People and the U.S. Government Policies with the Great Lakes Peace Center on Wednesday, November 3rd at 7 p.m. Just a little blurb about this presentation. It will provide an overview of the doctrine of Christian discovery and its impact on Indigenous communities, past and present. This centuries-old doctrine, which I read about today, which is fascinating, gave European explorers who discovered other lands the authority to claim those lands and subdue, even enslave, people simply because they were not Christian. Our two presenters, Deb Nadeau and Kathy Vanden Bogaard, will focus on some of the past government policies and how they affected the Indigenous populations, and also highlight the members currently serving in government. Registration is available right now through the Howell Carnegie's website. Next, the League of Women Voters of Livingston County, along with other leagues across the state, are working hard to educate voters on the security of our elections. Our presentation, titled Making Democracy Work, will provide an update on our current hard-fought voting rights and voting bills and initiatives that are being considered at the state and federal level. The presentation is scheduled for Tuesday, November 16th, starting at 7 p.m. Registration is going to be available soon through the Howell Library's website. And I also want to take a quick moment to thank the Howell Carnegie Library for making this virtual platform available to us this evening. We are extremely fortunate to partner with our local libraries in order to bring you these informational events. And now I'd like to introduce you to this evening's special guest, Brian Jonckheere, our Livingston County Drain Commissioner. Brian was elected Livingston County Drain Commissioner in 1996. He is a fourth-generation resident of Livingston County. He holds a Bachelor of Science in Fisheries and Wildlife Biology from Michigan State University and a Master's from State University of New York at Syracuse in Environmental Biology. His background includes work in the environmental health area as a sanitarian for the Livingston County Health Department. Brian, I hope you can explain what is a sanitarium. I read that description and I'm hoping you'll explain that a little bit. So anyway, I'll turn it over to Brian and thank you for joining us again.
Thanks, Ellen. I really appreciate it. Appreciate the opportunity. It's we spend a lot of time dealing with things in the field and not as much time letting our constituents understand kind of what we do out there. And even for those of you who are somewhat familiar with, I recognize a number of names in the audience, and you're fairly familiar with our office, is probably going to surprise you. But to answer your question, a sanitarian is like a public health expert. There are degrees in environmental health that go along with it. My biology degree just happened to fit with a lot of what they were looking for. But the sanitarians for the health department really do a lot of the permit issuance for well and septic. They do inspections when new wells are going in. They do they do the perk tests when you're looking to put in a new home or put a new septic field. And then they also do the inspections on all of the food service businesses here in the county. So all the inspections for making sure the food is, everything's properly stored and that type of thing. So they have quite a few duties over there, and they just kind of quietly work. But it's a great group of men and women that do a lot behind the scenes. And then even during this COVID, this whole COVID event, they've been working over with the personal and preventative side, doing trace calls and helping with the public health aspect of it. So quite a broad arena of expertise there, and not dissimilar to kind of what we do, although we work just primarily with water-based issues. So with that, so I don't take up the whole night, I'll start off. A number of people submitted questions, and I actually have the last 3 or 4 or 5 slides dedicated to answering those, but I'll kind of keep an eye out and chat if any come up in the middle part of it. But I'm going to try to leave plenty of time for questions. So I'm going to roll through this pretty quickly, just stopping very quickly on a number of slides. We're going to have this presentation available for people to download so they can kind of get the information that way if they want to. But I thought, to the extent possible, let's try to entertain as many questions. So if it's okay, I will share my screen. Let me see if I get the right one here. I think I got it. I had some help from the ladies here on this one. I didn't come up with this myself, but when you're called Drain Commissioner, it really doesn't matter what else you say about them, because you can't really offend us. So dams, dirt, drains, and rains actually is a pretty nice title for us. So and that really kind of sums up a lot of what we do. But you're going to be surprised, I think, at the number of things that we're involved in. She already mentioned my background. I grew up on the family farm that still is held by my parents, and that was settled in 1911 by my great-grandparents, who came over on the Mauretania, which is actually the sister ship to the Lusitania, which was sunk in a big part of the start of the Second World War. But anyway, so I have a lot of history here. All my family is from this area, and being in the farm background, I grew up hunting and fishing, and that was so important to me, those resources, and it really kind of drove my direction in college and why I went into fisheries and wildlife. So, and especially working on an island in the St. Lawrence studying muskies. And for those who want to ask me this question, the biggest muskie I've ever seen was 54 inches out in the St. Lawrence. And she was spawned out, so she was kind of skinny, and she was 26 inches around. So 4 of us could sit there and hold her on our laps. That's a big fish. So really, really interesting part of my graduate work. So I had some interesting aspects of drainage, or some historical tidbits for you. Michigan really was avoided for quite a long time by the early settlers, and that was because Michigan was so wet. And I think it's rated generally around number 5th in the union in terms of being the wettest state. So a lot of wetlands, malaria was pretty prevalent. The early surveyor generals who went through, said the land wasn't worth the amount it would take to drain it. And, it just went on and on from there. And in fact, the federal government started giving land to soldiers coming out of the Civil War. And when they got to Michigan, they found out a lot of that land was underwater. And so the federal government took a black eye in the papers, were being accused of giving veterans worthless land. So they quickly reined that back and started giving them land out further west, Iowa, Missouri, and those states. So it wasn't until there was a concerted effort to come in and work on drainage that Michigan got much attention. But the signs that used to be on the border said this: don't go to Michigan, that land of ills. The word means ague, fever, and chills. Again, reference to malaria and other maladies.
Ryan?
Yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt here. I believe your display settings, we see the presentation side. If you'd like to go into your PowerPoint, because we're seeing some red flashes.
Oh, okay. Let me do, yeah, it's kind of reversed on me here.
Yeah, it undid the settings you had set up as beforehand.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Let me see. I need to.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks for letting me know. But you'll be interested to know some of the history and drainage going back to 1819. And so that was, roughly the time where there's still a lot of Indian tribes around here when their capital was in Detroit, and they passed some of the first the first laws regarding highways, and those had provisions for drainage because the roads really depended on that drainage. And so move on into the mid 1800s. And actually, at that point, there were only township drain commissioners. And then later, I think 1871 is when county drain commissioners came about. So for a time, there was both township and county drain commissioners. And believe it or not, we still retain authority over all those drains. I thought our earliest drains went back to 1865, and I found out this week that some of the earlier drains that were created by some of the townships, for which we don't have a whole lot of files on, go back to 1840. So we have some drains that stretch back as far as 1840. And you can see as we move through into the late 1800s, that was after the movement of the capital to Lansing. And of course, Lansing was by and large pretty wet, and we were seeing closures of Michigan State University because of faculty and staff being off for malaria. And so you saw an act from the state to fund a lot of drainage in order to help alleviate some of those problems. So that's kind of where it really went full bore is about that time in the late 1800s and right around the turn of the century. It wasn't until 1909 that the position became elected. And then the last major codification was in 1956. And of course, there's been a lot of changes since then, but that by and large is the last major revamp of the drain code. Okay. I'm going to talk about, this is a blown up version and a scaled out version. You can see our drains are based on watersheds, or in the language of the drain code, districts. And in this case, you can see Taylor Drain in Brighton. And really it just maps out the topography in the area. Anything outside of that purple line, the water would generally flow in the other direction and go into a different drain. In this case, you can see that the Taylor Drain flows down, crosses the expressway and drops into the Carter Drain on the other side. So the entire county is riddled with these, not the entire county, because Districts, the Office of the Drain Commissioner is only involved in districts which were petitioned and established by the people. So if we go outside of this area and they were never established as a drain, we have absolutely no authority. That's private property and we have to stay off that. It's only where we have dedicated easements and a responsibility to go because it's a county drain. Just very quickly, some of the divisions in our office, we have an environmental division which deals a lot with our lakes. Of course, our office support, stormwater drains. We have an accounting division, and then we have a sanitary or wastewater division that handles our wastewater. And I'll show you some examples of that moving forward. This is what might surprise a lot of people, and I'll give you some pictures to show what exactly we do. And the reality is a drain commissioner by himself actually cannot do anything. Basically, if you have a drain, you can do some minor maintenance. It's only through statutes that give us the authority and petitioning. And so it's kind of interesting to see even some quotes from past attorneys generals to say, you know, the position of drain commissioner really doesn't have any authority whatsoever to do anything unless they're petitioned for something. And that's absolutely true. If they're petitioned or they are appointed to do something. The soil erosion and sedimentation control program, that's held by the county and they've appointed our office to administer that. So any of the development you see those black fences when you drive around, those fabric fences, that and stone and everything else, we inspect those sites regularly to ensure that we're minimizing the amount of soil erosion going off and into the drains, into the lakes and streams and that kind of thing. So that's certainly one of our most active, if not our most active program, because a lot of time and effort, especially this year with the rain we've gotten. Stormwater management plan review, a lot of the developments or subdivisions, businesses that come in will review, or the township will review, and they'll review it to the standards we've adopted over the years. We also maintain municipal and small community wastewater systems. So those might be anywhere from one that serves 8 homes up to our system, our Livingston Regional and Heartland and Tyrone serving, you know, boy, I think it's over 3,000 homes at this point. The Department of Public Works runs through my office, so a lot of the wastewater facilities that you see or the drinking water facilities you see have been built through our office. Lake improvement projects. So we're often petitioned for different things, whether it be dredging or weed control. Weed control being the most the most prevalent case for us, because obviously as the lakes age, they get shallower and shallower. We're dealing more and more with weed issues, and so this allows riparian residents to start up a program to help treat or do whatever, whether it's harvesting of those plants and improve the recreational value of that body of water. Lake levels, we're talking a little bit about that because that means dams. I think we have 9 in the county right now. And of course, that's a big issue given the collapse of the Midland County dams, the Edenville and the Sanford Lake Dam. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Establish new drains. Something with all the rain we've been seeing is on a level we haven't seen, I don't think, in my 25 years here. So awful lot of petitions coming in. And that's for a couple of reasons. One is the amount of water that people are dealing with. But secondly, is a lot of our infrastructure is clay tiles dating back to the turn of the century, and those are degrading. So it's amazing that even some of those still work and work pretty well. So we're dealing with those aging and that collapsing infrastructure. We maintain existing drains, anything that's been established. We have an obligation to do maintenance, although we're limited in how much we can do. The solid the solid waste program is through our office as well. And we have a number of activities we do, and probably many of you have attended some of them. We're going to go into that. And then phase 2 coordination. Phase 2 is a segment of the Clean Water Act, and we are involved in facilitating that throughout the county. And that's basically watershed management. And the idea is to reduce our impacts on water quality throughout not just Livingston County, but by everybody doing it, we ultimately hope to make a big difference on the receiving water bodies, which are our Great Lakes and even downstream from there. So essentially anything water or anything, any of our legislators, any bill that's been passed that comes up with something, essentially when they're posed with an issue, that involves water, they're trying to think who we include in that. And they're like, oh, the drain commissioner. So we get written into these things, sometimes appropriately, maybe other times because they don't know who else to put in there. So, or maybe they're mad at us for a reason. I don't know. Now, our office is going to be different. This is a few years ago, but our office, we're field people typically. They don't like the fancy restaurants. So I started having my Christmas luncheons at our garage. And it's dusty. A lot of times there's a bird flying around in there, but they don't care because they're outdoor people, and they enjoy that environment. So it is traditionally just a different it is a different group of people than you might find in other offices in the county. So I mentioned the soil erosion. Here's some of that silt fence I mentioned. So we do regular inspections, and this is one where we'd have to tell the developer to do some upkeep there. So he's had to do several layers of silt fence to help prevent some of the washing going down into the lake there. Now here's an example of a really bad one. Now this is on Thompson Lake. And of course, nobody's doing anything with their silt fence. And as it's raining, you see the rills on the side of the hill, all that's washing into the lake. And interestingly, some of these same people call to complain about weeds now in the lake. And I occasionally like showing them this picture so they understand part of the reason is a lot of the nutrients in the soils that were up here that are providing substrate for those weeds were washed down when their houses were being built. So it's good to understand the impacts that we have on resources adjacent to us. So I just have a bunch of little clips coming in here. This is here's some drain maintenance, replacing some clay tiles. We're putting a culvert underneath the road, monitoring our watersheds. There's some monitoring projects we did on the Red Cedar. You might notice these battery buckets in our local libraries and township halls. We collect those batteries. I'm guessing that was about 6 months worth of batteries. So we collect a lot of batteries. We in the past have worked with McPherson Hospital to do a mercury thermometer exchange, do other things. Here's some electroshocking we've done in North Oak Creek as an educational thing for the students. Labeling some of our catch basins so people understand not to throw pet waste in there or anything else, because that goes to our lakes and streams. Of course, you might imagine we get involved in flood response. Yes, we even have an old landfill that we have to monitor in Howell Township, and have to haul leachate. We have to monitor for methane gases, the whole 9 yards. Dams, as you might imagine, you saw a picture there of the Nishwa Dam. This is one of you see a number of videos here that come in, a tire collection. There's an electronics collection in the lower right, and then a household hazardous waste collection in the upper left. And yes, we still do get giant 500-pound TVs at these things, if anybody's looking for one. So, but it's a great outlet for people to take things on their shelves, oil-based paints, hazardous material, herbicides, to get rid of them. Same with tires, because guess what? When people can't find an outlet for them, we usually find them in our county drains, and then it becomes more difficult, and you have other impacts. You'll see in the upper right, this is Thompson Lake, where we actually every other year stocked northern pike, and that's a long story, but we usually like to invite the community and have them bring the kids down. It's kind of nice to watch them put buckets of northern pike fingerlings into the lake. So kind of a unusual thing, but we really enjoy it, and it's pretty fascinating for the people that live around the lake. And if you've ever fished northern pike there, there's some big ones in there, so you understand that what we do there definitely has an impact on that fishery. Lake improvements, I mentioned whether it's herbicide applications or harvesting. Here's one of the harvesters in action. And a lot of times we actually cannot apply herbicides because they're native plants or whatever. And so harvesters give us an option to work in areas we couldn't otherwise work in. We have some lake aeration projects going. And we also actually just finished up with a diver-assisted suction harvesting operation down in Highland Lake in Putnam Township. And we're seeing invasive species right now that are giving us a lot of problems, too difficult to harvest, where you can't treat them with herbicides. And so there's actually companies that come in with big suction devices and divers to pull that out. So we're pretty impressed with what we've seen. Our solid waste program, again, I mentioned a number of you probably have attended some of these, but we look to get to divert some of our waste that's generated. And the reason for doing that is if you have an effective waste diversion program, it gives you some insulation from somebody coming in and putting in a landfill in your county. And a number of years ago, you'll remember that a landfill was being proposed for land in Marion Township. And so an extremely tense time for a lot of people in that area. So whether it's household hazardous waste, tires, electronics, or even compost bin sales, we've done that, because a lot of the waste that goes to our landfill is yard waste. So we get people to compost that instead of throwing it away and filling our landfills. It's certainly a benefit, especially for our kids down the road. There's a picture of one of our compost bins that we did, and we had a lot of interest, as you can see. Hundreds of people in line there. Here are some of our stats you might be interested in terms of what we've collected. So in terms of household hazardous waste, and we just finished, I think, our 2021 collections, but upwards 2019 of 60,000 pounds of hazardous waste we were able to divert. Electronics waste collection. I'm not sure, we might have had fewer collections last year, but we've typically been over 100,000 pounds of electronics that we've recycled. Scrap tire collections, you see last year we were almost at 2,000 tires we took in. This is on top of what a lot of the local municipalities do. A lot of the townships have their own collections as well. And then battery collection, certainly one of our most popular programs, over 30,000 pounds last year of batteries collected. So a lot of waste diversion, although it sounds like a lot, but it's really probably the tip of the iceberg compared to what's being thrown in the trash. So we want to see those rise in the future. Kind of going back on the landfill again, and some of the things that we do there through our DPW, just take my word for it. And I don't know how some of the townships were able to give it to the county, but you never want a landfill because it is forever a money pit. And obviously there's a lot of regulations that go into this. So we spend a lot of time maintaining this landfill. You really can't use it for anything. I mentioned phase 2, that's of the Clean Water Act, and it really stems out of a lot of the things that we're seeing in the 60s. And you may remember some old newsreels. It's really not, it's pretty much well recognized that when your river is on fire, it's definitely not good. And you can see at the time, there were really no regulations for discharge from industry or wastewater treatment plants. And it was so bad that, you know, a lot of rivers around the county actually started on fire, which is obviously not good. I'm not sure how you put one of those out, but it got a lot of attention. And so as a result of that, in the early 70s, the Clean Water Act came about. And since then, it's guided a lot of where we've gone in society with, you know, improving water quality and that type of thing. The first phase was getting rid of all those big pipes, getting industry from discharging. After we did that, and this is the toughest part, it's non-point source pollution, which means the stuff that we do on a daily basis that all adds up, whether it's all of us fertilizing our lawn, or you know, mowing right down to the water's edge, not leaving some, and allowing more runoff. There's a whole bunch of behaviors that together we all contribute to producing impacts on our lakes and streams. And of course, what's become pretty, I don't think we heard about it much last year, but up until COVID, we saw some massive blue-green algae blooms in Lake Erie. So there's a lot of concern there. I mentioned the wastewater operations. This system serves both Hartland and Tyrone townships, and ultimately discharges into Genesee County up in Linden. So it's a very spread out system with I think around 2,500, 3,000 users on that system. This is an old map SEMCOG did, but it shows you some of the expected expansions of sewers. I don't think we're anywhere near that yet, because a lot of things have really slowed down in the last couple of years, but this was a look going back, I think, in 2014 or so. But it shows you roughly the extent of sewers in the county and really what's been planned, or what's at least on the master plans, which are kind of just guesstimates to what's going to happen in the future. So kind of interesting. The rest of the county is on an on-site, meaning they're on their own septic fields, and that has its own set of issues. We take care of dams, as I mentioned, and we have a number of them. Most of them are in this small type of weir you see on the bottom right, but we have a couple that are high hazard dams, and we've gotten a lot of press recently from those that failed in Midland County. These are nowhere near that size, nor would they have nearly the impact that those did. But there is a big change that's pending in the legislature as they look for, for more accountability from dam operators. Here's something that one of my staff put together, because there was a question somebody had submitted about the dams in Livingston County. This will give you a good idea of which ones are private and which ones are public, which ones we operate, that type of thing. Again, most of them are pretty small dams. Just some snapshots of some of the flood response that we've done in the past. In this case, except for the bottom right, this was all along Ore Lake and the Huron River. So again, we had another scare this past summer after a lot of rain, and it continues to be a source of concern going into the future. I know, and I have some answers to questions. I know several people had questions on the Huron River. Septage is one thing that occupies a bunch of our time. This was the old way of disposing of waste from septic tanks when they're pumped. So the honey dipper, whatever you call, that truck comes out, pumps your tank, and it used to be discharged onto these fields. And of course, the runoff poses problems. Obviously, you have a pet run through there, comes home and gets on the kids. There's wildlife that track through it. So there's a lot of concerns, obviously. And so we did build a septic receiving station. This is at the Clyde Road exit of US 23. And in doing so, we were able to ban land application throughout the county. And so this gives haulers a place to dump that septage, and then it goes into the regular waste stream and up into Genesee County where it's treated. So no more going on the roads here, or on the fields here in Livingston County. Oh, yeah, and so I put this together. If I can reach the play button. This is some of the glamorous work that you get to do as drain commissioner and staff. So I just wanted to jump through that. A lot of the slapstick music was really to pick on our, to show how dissatisfied we were with this setup here. We spent, I don't know, 3 or 4 hours that Friday. It was a Friday night until like 1 o'clock in the morning. You see my deputy, Michelle LaRose, was there and worked the entire time. And so you see from our office, it really doesn't matter. And it's all waste, septic tank waste that's gone through some processing, but it's a mess. And you know, we're the only strange people that would actually enjoy cleaning up something like that. So going back to the strangeness of drain offices. I wanted to put this in primarily so you can access it in the future when you download the presentation. This is a pre-settlement map of Livingston County. And really what I wanted to point out, you know, a lot of this shows a lot of wet areas, you know, forested wetland. But one thing that's missing is, you know, clear routes of the streams. We don't see the Shiawassee. We may see bits of it. Here we see some of the red cedar. Even the Huron is probably more of a series of localized ponds and connected wetlands. At that time, you know, the water probably flowed less as a river and more during the spring and the fall. And it really wasn't until we started developing, we figured out, hey, we've got to, you know, basically dig some streams to get this water away. And that's what happened. Ultimately, much of this county would not be, it wouldn't be habitable, or you wouldn't be able to get to your homes simply because the roads would be impassable. You'd be taking a helicopter to your place of work. But it's an interesting slide, and when you download, you can see this. And I think you get off the, I don't know if it's through Michigan State or the state, but it's the state wetlands inventory, and they have a lot of neat maps there. I can find, if somebody is interested, I can find the exact location. Just some pictures we've done on some lake shore stabilization. A lot of this resonates because of the phase 2 MPDS permit that we're under. So looking at ways we can incorporate environmental amenities into our work is a big part of what we do in our day-to-day work. So, and we've incorporated that, whether it's, you know, just getting grants to do work in areas that in public areas that need it, or whether it's work on the drains as we're cleaning it. They're things that we take pretty seriously. Some drain commissioners get a lot of bad press, and often deservedly, because of some of the damage that's done. And there's no good way of doing these projects, but you can see what a you know, clean drain looks like at times. And with all the deadfall, and of course that blocks up water, causes flooding. And then you can see we've done, we have some, J hooks here. And the idea there is to use structures to force water in the center of the channel and avoid some of the erosion that you see going on. And that's kind of a primary problem we have with a lot of the drains is the erosion. So using things like that, very helpful in stabilizing the banks and reducing input into the streams and then ultimately our lakes. Some more ideas of drain projects that we've done, two-stage channels to try to, preserve that flow, have some little depth of water for fish, but these shallow banks on the side allow during times of flood to deposit sediment outside of that main channel. So a lot of new techniques we've employed in the last 10 to 15 years. This is not our project, this is the Algae River, but you can see the massive extent of erosion on that outside turn on that bank. And then after construction, they have mulch blanket down, so it hasn't been fully stabilized, but certainly probably a better situation than what they had before. And so I'm going to kind of jump through really quickly because I want time for everybody to ask questions, but just some things that how we've differed. I couldn't even recognize our office. It was basically a small scale stormwater drainage, and we've taken that to a far more sophisticated level in terms of our technology, in terms of our staffing. So it's pretty amazing the stuff that we get into. Some of those maps, for instance, that I've shown are some of the GIS mapping data that really our office was one of the first to really push with Livingston County. And that's because simply, as I mentioned before, we work outside, we work with the land. And so those type of things are very helpful for us in being able to accomplish what we need to do. Shout out to my staff, during some of these past storms, they would work 30 hours or more, have a few hours of sleep and then come back to work. During COVID, my wastewater operators, after a couple of weeks, wanted to come back and full time. We didn't know how dangerous it was being in everybody's wastewater. We actually it's probably safer than being in a lot of areas, but my staff didn't care. They wanted to do their job. I think that speaks volumes for the people that we have here. Some of the things we can't do, a lot of our laws, our current model, unfortunately, is we build our homes, our developments. We wait for the problems to resolve. There's some scrutiny, sure, certainly, but not enough. And then what we have to do is construct drains as a solution. And that's really the wrong way of doing it. It's far more expensive that way. And at some point in the future, we hope our legislators do something to address this. But there's a lot of other things on their radar right now. So looking long term and addressing those needs are something we're working at internally with our building department. But to be really effective, we need the laws at the state level to really give us authority to work proactively. And we're slowly getting there, but in the Great Lakes state, we can certainly do a lot more to protect our waters, the waters of the state. So some of the things I think, will continue to happen in the future. We've had lately more conflicts with, I have the DEQ, and that's outdated. It should be EGLE, is now our resource protector at the state level, and their sister agency is the DNR. But we work closely with them, try to work through our differences, and it's been working quite well. I see a lot of changes coming on, especially with dams, a lot of legislation currently going through the pipe right now that will basically make it difficult for private operators to continue. So it's no secret that the intent is to force private dam operators to either tear out their dams, and which is not really popular if you happen to live on the lake, or to transfer them to public ownership. And so we're kind of worried about, the flood, so to speak, of petitions we may be receiving in the future. So, and then we're also working on some cooperative efforts with other utilities to share specialized equipment and help reduce costs. There's a lot of that always going on, but trying to have an organized, coordinator of all this, we think is in everyone's best interest, and it brings savings to our constituents who use our utilities. So now what I have is a few things. I think the next slide I jump into some of the questions people have submitted, but I threw down some anecdotes here. Is, the most satisfying part of our job, at least to me, is being able to help people. And you have to be careful. I found out one time I was smiling during a flood, and some people asked me why I was so happy when everybody was flooding. I have to remember that I was happy because we were helping, but you also have to recognize that there's a lot of people not happy with what's going on. So, that was a lesson to me. The most frustrating part of our job, we cannot do anything with private drainage other than perhaps to give advice. And so that's very frustrating because we only have authority within public rights of way and county drains, that type of thing, or if it deals with soil erosion. So, and then also I put that at a tie at working with our current development laws. Our top 3 impediments: fragmented land use laws in Michigan, and they haven't gotten a whole lot better in the last 20 years. Dealing with more of, a population that sees less value in being a good neighbor, to put it kindly, I guess. We just don't see the type of coordination, people that will flood their neighbors out. They move in, do something, flood them out, and when you talk to them, they can really care less that their neighbor's basement is flooded. And that is really startling. Certainly not something that I grew up with. And the state regulatory burdens make it difficult for us. So, they're certainly in some cases very much needed, but a lot of times they seem focused on stopping, some of the necessary work we have to do. So that will always be a concern, and something when you're dealing with natural resources, you're always going to be dealing with. So, you just have to get used to it. Our department's greatest asset is our staff. And some of the questions here that came up about providing us assistance to associations, we love to do that. A lot of associations let their stormwater systems go, and we'll go out and take a walk, with the association officers or whomever is interested, kind of give them some thoughts on what they can do, who they can contact, some recommendations based on what we're seeing with their system. We had questions about contractors and people to perform work in the subdivision. We can't recommend that directly, but we can certainly provide names of people that we know have work in that type of thing, in that arena, and have typically done good a good job in the past, at least to our knowledge. Stagnant water sitting on our property, what do you do? And that gets tricky, especially if it's a creek. So it really depends on whether that creek is regulated or not, and it gets far more complicated. You're involving the state, with EGLE specifically, Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy. And so it's be something, certainly welcome to give us a call. We'd be happy to go over that with you, and try to give you some direction. The Huron River was quite popular, so great questions on the Huron River. And as I said here, the simple yet inconvenient answer is that the Huron will always occupy the floodplain during periods of excessive rain. And that's just naturally what the floodplain is for the flooding. We have a lot of homes built there. And to make things worse, we're seeing more intense storms and more development in the watershed. So that watershed, we see the problems down at Ore Lake. That watershed extends all the way into Oakland County, up just south of the 12 Oaks Mall. So any development that's being done there exacerbates the problem. further downstream. And so one of the few things that, you know, people have available to them is raising their home. And that has been probably one of the most effective things. We are looking at better ways to protect homes than just sandbags. But for right now, you know, and, you know, for the future, raising your home and raising it high enough to prevent flooding is really one of the only, you know, really trustworthy options that a lot of people have available. How many earthen dams are there in the county? Saw the map before, and that's tough to answer because most of the dams, I think, when I think back, have some type of earthen component to the sides of them. So they're all to some extent earthen dams, and then in the center, you know, usually a concrete structure to control that water. But again, nothing on the order of what we saw in Midland County. How do I know who to contact when I have a drain issue? MHOG, the county, or the state? For private drainage issues, you know, and this is again very frustrating part of our job is when we can't help, but we can't resolve flooding, private flooding issues. The only arbiter of private drainage issues is the courts, unfortunately. So that requires a significant expense. But sometimes, depending if it's a county drain, if it's roadway, whether it's MDOT or road commission, there are certainly things where you can get help from those organizations. A lot of times from our office, if it's a county drain that's involved. So maybe the best way I would say is just to call our office, and we can give you some background into maybe where you want to look. So if you don't end up getting satisfactory answers, then call me, and my secretaries will do what they can to divert some of the calls, but you know, tell them you want to talk to me and leave a message, and we'll be back in touch. What's the most at-risk dam in the county? That's a tough one because so much of a dam is in its foundation and things that we have no information on. I will say the one that we've responded to that's come the closest to failure is the Bullard Lake Dam off of Bullard Road. But I know that the association has done a lot of work there. So that has improved considerably. What I'm most concerned about is how the new regulations are going to impact the people on that lake as those regulations change. What's the report card? You know, if you go through, there's an interactive, and I'll have to supply that, but there's an interactive map. You can search for it with Eagle and search for dam condition, but there is an interactive map where you can click on each one that gives you some limited information. Whether, you know, you never get an attaboy for having a great dam. The best you get is satisfactory. Is satisfactory, fair, and poor. I think those are the only three. And so, you know, the poor dams that are a foot tall aren't much of a concern, but the ones that are 20 feet tall, those are the ones that you have to worry about. But it's a good place to get information on those dams, who owns it and operates it. Not sure how often it's been updated because there is some old information on there. So I would say generally good. Most of the dams are in the satisfactory to fair condition. But again, most of our dams, being in the upper portions of our watersheds, are very small dams. You move downstream closer to the Great Lakes, you see some very large dams. So we're lucky in that sense to be the person on top of the hill. And I'm sure there's a lot of interest in how the regulations, in fact, our stormwater runoff, are they sufficient to protect water quality? You know, my answer, probably not. There's a lot more that we can do. And as the Great Lakes state, I'm surprised that we aren't doing a lot of the things that our neighboring states are doing. So sometimes when you have lots of water, you take it for granted. And when I go to states that really are lacking water, they're much more appreciative of water and water quality, or at least so it seems. And You know, here's a map on the right graph showing some of the severity forecasts for algae blooms, which incidentally have gotten really bad, and that's despite reductions in phosphorus. If you've been at all a follower of what's been happening in the state with the Lake Erie, we've greatly reduced the amount of phosphorus getting into that lake. However, we have warmer temperatures and we have more extreme rain events, which really are more effective at pulling phosphorus off of soils and washing it downstream. So one of the forms of phosphorus, which is soluble reactive phosphorus, we're seeing more of, even though total phosphorus we're not seeing as much of. That difference in the phosphorus, because of rains and maybe some other activities by people, have created a lot of the blue-green algae blooms. So I apologize, I jumped through probably a few highly technical issues there. I may have lost some of you, but I think that was it. I had hoped to stop long before this, but at least I did make it through some questions. So, Brandy, did you have, I apologize, I wasn't watching my chat, so I didn't see if anything came up, but did you have anything else I may not have covered?
Well, there have been several questions that have been added to the chat, but we only have 2 minutes running. So were you able to cover all the questions that were entered before, I believe, before we started the program?
I think mostly, except somebody was wondering about some projects along Oak Grove Road, and so I think my suggestion there is to make sure give me a call and I can more specifically address that, because we do have a lot of things going on along Oak Grove Road. So maybe I can shed some light on that. Yeah, so what I see, I'm getting them all.
Looks like the first one, Jean Becker asked, do we have lead pipes here?
No, and I won't say there's no lead in them, but you know, our systems are all much newer. So whether it's maybe not storm sewers, but with sanitary and drinking water, those systems are far newer than what you see in some of the cities that have had problems like Flint, and then more recently Benton Harbor. You know, a lot of old pipes that, you know, depending on what's in the water, can really leach some of that lead out into the drinking water system. So here it's basically all high density polyethylene pipes and other things. So there's really not a lot to worry about. Even, you know, our MHOG system has been, they got one of the top 5 in the nation in terms of best tasting groundwater, or best tasting water from a municipal agency. It was about 8-10 years ago, but so no, we don't really have to worry about that. There certainly probably are some lead fixtures here and there, but probably not enough to make an impact in terms of an entire drinking water system. Probably most of the concern would be from the groundwater we're drawing from, and whether there are contaminants there, but that's regulated pretty closely by the state. I do see.
There were plenty of more questions, but unfortunately we've run out of time. If we'd like Claire to come and join us.
Yes, so, you know, Brian, we want to thank you very much for joining us this evening. One of our favorite parts of the League of Women Voters is showcasing our elected officials. We just think in Livingston County that we are so blessed with people that really care about the county, give 110%, and certainly you feel that way about your staff. And it's very obvious that you're very passionate about your job, and we just really appreciate you spending the evening with us, and want to remind everybody that we are a nonpartisan organization, and we really support our elected officials and appreciate all the hard work you guys put in. And I hope everybody enjoyed this and learned something. and feels good about the people that are working for Livingston County.
Thanks again for having me. I will, can somebody send me the chat history, and then I can respond, and that's something you could put on your board for people to download. And then anybody, and again, I apologize, we didn't have time to go through questions from everybody, but feel free to give me a call here, and I'd be more than happy to help answer questions. Our number here at the office is 517-546-0040. Again, 517-546-0040. Thanks, ladies, for having me. I sincerely appreciate it.
Yes, thank you, Brian. Thank you, Claire. Thank you, Ellen. We're so glad that we had you here to share your knowledge, your expansive knowledge and expertise, Brian. So much information, fantastic. Thank you to our partner, League of Women Voters of Livingston County, for making this evening possible. Visit their website, www.lwvbrightonhowellarea.org, to learn more about the organization and how you can become involved. And thank you again for all for attending tonight's program. We hope you enjoyed it. Please take a few minutes to tell us what you thought of the program in the short evaluation I linked in the chat. As Ellen mentioned, our next League of Women Voters and Howell Library Partnership Program will be on Wednesday, November 3rd at 7 p.m. on Indigenous people and U.S. government policies with the Great Lakes Peace Center. Sign up now at the link I shared in the chat. And of course, visit our website, howelllibrary.org, to find out more about our library's programs and services. Thanks again, everyone. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Thank you.